people look at her like that, though, because she do like that.
Okay, you gonna try to get me out of my... All right, I see.
You think about that, Joseph. I need you to take a stand.
He didn't even hear it.
Don't play both sides. Don't just get by. Don't be a biatch. What do you think?
Only a few episodes into her role as the new co-host of the Joe Budden podcast, Mona is causing unpleasant situations for the show. Since its inception, the Joe Budden podcast has progressed from a tiny podcast with potential to a large podcast with potential. As they attempt to project an image of a pirate ship, they also began to safeguard industrial relationships and truly transform into a PC version. However, Joe appears to find that more difficult now that Mona is around. And you witnessed it in this just-released episode.
Release date 6 months ahead of time.
And right
Nowadays,
after your sworn enemy drops. Like, why?
Joe also appeared uneasy. Joe seemed so uneasy that Marc Lamont Hill would criticize him for being cautious.
You gonna try to get me out of my... All right, I see. All right, I see what's going on.
Joe,
What do you say about that, Joe? What do you think about that?
What was intriguing about this was that Joe Budden gymmed his way out without really responding by using his A-like skills.
To you, Joe Budden, what do you think about that?
People that have that take, it's understandably so. I can see how they got how they got there.
I thought he was nuts. He's not even making a joke, really. He won't even say, hey, you know I'm a fake. Nikki and I are cool, you know. He doesn't do it at all. He simply proceeded to make his tiny hook shot. Every podcaster has a catchphrase, you know. For example, Rory uses the sea lion technique, in which he bombards you with questions to give the impression that he's interested in you, but in reality, he's really attempting to discredit your position. Joe, however, becomes loud.
I'm announcing my album right in the middle of whatever that doing.
After that, does the whole "let me be COE now" thing happen? Satisfied with everything, it's crucial to keep in mind that Marc did this to Joe Budden after Joe criticized him for being cautious in the previous episode.
Do you think with the information that we have been given...
He good. He
Now
bad.
you're going on stupid.
Concerning the settlement of Cardi B and Offset's divorce, Joe pointed out that Marc wasn't really expressing his viewpoint. Instead, he was merely attempting to comprehend both perspectives. In this sense, Joe Budden has met his equal, as you can see. Nobody else on the show can pick up a back and forth between episodes as well as Marc can. What I'm saying is this. In contrast to Marc, who can shoot inside the cutting lines of content and preserve creative continuity, Ish and Flip have attempted to resolve their differences with Joe across several episodes, but they are typically petty and overly invested. Before Joe plays the boss card on Marc, either on screen or off, we'll need to see how long he can put up with this. I'm referring to the amount of time until Joe can tolerate being made fun of by Marc. Joe Budden can probably put Marc on the defensive. However, I'm not sure if that's the case. As demonstrated in this episode, Marc goes back and asks, "Oh, Joe, what are your thoughts about Nicki Minaj if he becomes petty?" You also witnessed Joe's exposure. Additionally, there was other footage in which Joe Budden avoided the topic when Mona attempted to, criticize Nicki Minaj for her gatekeeper behavior.
She was real standoffish to people that were coming, the new girls.
Additionally, Joe Budden declined to express a genuine viewpoint on Ace Bailey. And the reason I picked this clip is that it's just another example of how the show's protagonist has become more secure. And it results in another that Marc Lamont Hill calls out.
I will not give my real opinion on this one. Well, what do you guys think?
I'll give mine because I don't like to play both sides.
However, Mona was also seeing directly how her time on the show had developed, as Joe Budden felt at ease enough to mock her and her voice.
My raps like at the BBL, we can make some money. What's up?
Or holes.
Later on, he would also ridicule her wig. Intriguingly, they've already reached a stage where Mona appears to be one of the men. Additionally, it stands in sharp contrast to Melissa Ford, who claimed to be one of the boys but was treated like a child. Like, Mona is going to start making jokes on the cast and earn her stripes. And we'll see how they handle it if they shut down and begin to grow hostile, because there's a chance that Mona will visit there with other cast members before they shut down and make things strange for her. in which case she will lose the identity that made her appealing to the Joe Budden podcast and its universe. As we talk about Jeezy versus Gucci and their verses, I also want to take this chance to talk about Mona and how she's kind of making things uncomfortable and exposing certain stuff. Mona pointed out that it was quite heated and that Ice felt compelled to stand up for Jeezy at the time since he is a fan of Jeezy.
Before it happened, and he said, yo, this is what I'm gonna do.
Oh.
They spoke.
It was understanding.
It was an understanding, like, yo, I'm going to do this. Yo, get off, dog.
Jeezy looked like mortified a little bit.
Because it still went further than he thought.
Yeah, because
even when he was like,
say everything he gonna do, Ice. Like everything. He can't say everything he gonna do.
Now, that struck me as awful. First of all, just because you grew up with Jeezy, why do you feel the need to defend him as a Marvel comic book hero? That made me think of what you would do if you were a fan of Thor and didn't like the Hulk. No, Jeezy and Gucci actually talked, and they seemed perfectly cool. That seemed really foolish to me since I believe that everyone who watched the show and the Jeezy and Gucci verses realized that the moment was genuine. Regardless of how much they may have talked about how things would unfold, you witnessed Gucci go totally crazy. His eyes appear different. This seems to be more than just content. Additionally, I stepped on Mona's moment merely to preserve his Jeezy fandom's hive relationship. I'm not even sure whether he's truly cool with Jeezy in that way. I am aware that he receives free show tickets and other benefits. That was simply awful. It was awful that you left your new co-host hanging out there, and since many people ask, Danny, why do you hate Ice as a podcaster? This is merely evidence, an example of something I want to draw attention to. This was one instance of it. Later on, you saw the cast play it safe and promote the Ryu Said season, which is a comedy program in Saudi Arabia that is receiving a lot of funding. I'm referring to 10 times the rate that these individuals receive in the United States. And he draws attention to the fact that Saudi Arabia violates human rights in relation to the treatment of women and other issues. However, Joe Budden appears to be saying, dude, this is actually what you're going to talk about? This is something I don't want to discuss, even if it's a joke. I believe Joe would prefer not to discuss a business that might eventually sponsor the Joe Budden show. You never know if Ryu will say something like, hey, I'd like to get some recognition in the urban podcasting scene. Soon this company will launch a football league with Tom Brady. Tom Brady will be joining them for a flag football league. They may establish a league for basketball. They may wish to buy 10 times the rate they're expected to receive in advertising time on the Joe Budden program. So that's something to consider. That's interesting. What happens if Mark brings up an issue with the show that we don't anticipate? What if the show attracts an investor with a strange history of human rights concerns? Will Marc Lamont Hill remain or leave? What you observed is that this might be the start of a relationship between Mark and Joe. Not necessarily between the two individuals, but rather the business model. I want to conclude this video by stating that as we have all seen over the past few years, the show is now quite safe. These folks don't discuss their friends, really. They don't discuss the industry's workforce. Their discussions about Danny Lay will be different from their discussions about Fabulous, for example. You saw it in the Diddy coverage as well. They treat the people they care about like children. So you must be skeptical of whatever they say. A bucket of salt, really. You're not seeing the reality of the industry being told, you're seeing the commercialization of podcasting. And that reality is amply demonstrated by Mona's appearance on the show. She believed she would be able to be open-minded and freely talk about whatever she wanted to on a show. But it appears that she is now unable to discuss Nicki Minaj without making Joe Budden appear uncomfortable. But please share your thoughts in the comments section. Do you think Mona can talk about anything other than being handcuffed? Her statement, hey yo, in the industry, people feel like Nicki Minaj is a gatekeeper, and that's the main reason why she's at odds with Cardi B. That struck me as really cool. Now, Mona might be entirely wrong. Maybe Cardi B did some strange things, but it was refreshing that she was allowing the conversation to continue. What wasn't so refreshing, though, was how Joe Budden abruptly ended it and appeared uncomfortable, as though she were speaking about the right to an abortion or whatever. I thought that was somewhat strange. Mona is already quiet and devolving, so I need to watch to see whether she can establish equilibrium. I mean, I have to tell the truth. Sincerely, I'm enjoying Mona so far in these. The first few episodes, even though I didn't think I would enjoy her on the show. And I simply don't understand folks who claim to miss Melissa Ford. Simply said, I don't get it. The part where Mona talked about her past as a side chick struck me as amusing. Additionally, we haven't heard the voices of women on the show since Maudie the Body. Yes, exactly. Melissa Ford hasn't truly represented women's voices, and she was merely acting like her Barbara Walters.
She did, in my opinion, contribute much to the show, for example, by making it viral, but she did nothing at all to the conversation. That concludes my video for you guys. The last few weeks of podcasting have been enjoyable, and I must admit that it does align with Melissa Ford's absence. Melissa Ford is not a problem for me. She is gorgeous in my opinion, but I really prefer the podcast she produces, which makes me want more.